Now before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You do not know now what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "One who has bathed does not need to wash, except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was to betray him, and for this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." After he had washed their feet, had put on his robe, and had returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example, that you should also do as I have done to you. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor messengers greater than the ones who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me. And as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you should love one another. Just as I have loved you, also you should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another."
Great God, your love has called us here, as we by love for love were made. Your living likeness still we bear, though mud dishonored, disobeyed. We come with all
Here we begin a series of meditations connecting the Passion story to the poetry of R.S. Thomas, poems like this entitled Via Negativa, The Way of Negation. Why no? I never thought other than that God is that great absence in our lives, the empty silence within, the place where we go seeking, not in the hope to arrive or find. He keeps the interstices in our knowledge, the darkness between stars. His are the echoes we follow, the footprints he has just left. We put our hands in his side, hoping to find it warm. We look at people and places as though he had looked at them too, but miss the reflection. Missing, but only just missing, God's touch. We shouldn't be too hard on Peter, gusting from cold to hot in response to Jesus. God is hard to find if you're looking in the wrong place, hard to follow if your expectations are false. Let's take a look at Jesus and Peter, these two passing as ships in the night. First, Jesus. If we're talking ships, he is like the ocean liner. There's no stopping him, steering a stately course through death back to the Father from whom he came in the first place. We know his disciples will soon flee from him, but perhaps we miss the obvious. Jesus will not flee from them. He'll never flinch from the purpose of his journey, to love his own from start to finish, from beginning to end, and to love them with an abiding love that he shared with the Father from the beginning and would continue to share with the Father to the end. How could Peter miss all this? Yes, he's impetuous, but more than this, he's human. His horizons are set too small. He knows what to expect of a leader, and he knows what to expect after a day on the road, and between these two expectations lies an imaginative abyss. A leader does not deal in dust. But Jesus gets up from the table, takes off his outer robe, and ties a towel around himself. Then he pours water into a basin and begins to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. The evangelist paints a slow portrait of Jesus taking what the Father has placed into his hands as he faces death, namely, his disciples' feet. Their feet are in his hands. It's the epitome of what it means for God to love people to the end, to enslave himself to their creaturely need, to serve every far facet of their humanity. The narrative gradually discloses what it means to love in practice, but the slow pace of the plot ratchets up the horror of the act as Peter observes it. When Jesus finally arrives at his feet, he feels duty-bound to fend off his master's embarrassing ministrations. Maybe the other disciples have failed to understand Jesus' place at table, but he certainly hasn't. No, Lord, you shall never wash my feet. Peter is unprepared to accept this love. He's determined to make himself subservient. When Jesus insists he must be washed, Peter says, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. He wants Jesus to be above him, to be over him, not under him. loving him. Why, no. I never thought other than that God is that great absence in our lives, the empty silence within, the place where we go seeking, not in hope to arrive or find. He keeps the interstices in our knowledge, the darkness between stars. His are the echoes we follow, the footprints he has just left. We put our hands in his high side, hoping to find it warm. We look at people and places as though he had looked at them too, but miss the reflection. Missing, but only just missing, God's hand in our lives. Peter is in the same room as Jesus, being cleansed by Jesus, being spoken to by Jesus, and yet he doesn't understand. He doesn't know where or how to look. That's why we return to this washing of feet at the beginning of this most intense period of Holy Week, to reset our sights on God. We're grateful to Peter for doing what we all do, being slow on the uptake and resistant to God. We're like the parched earth, unable to absorb the drops of rain landing on it. And here lies the wisdom of Jesus as Peter refuses him. Accept it now, understand it later. And here lies the wisdom for us today. There's too much for us to take in, and too much stuff in our heads to make much progress. But here we are with Christ anyway, with our half-baked ideas and hungry hearts, both dreading and longing for his touch. And we hear again this slow story of God being right among us, but in the wrong place for us to accept him yet. R.S. Thomas's poem is called Via Negativa, the way of negation. The way of negation is a tried and tested way to know more of the living God beyond our categories and constructs. For R.S. Thomas, it was the only way to look in the gaps between, to read between the lines, to crucify all false expectations. If we're frustrated by the prospect of doing this, then we can either give up trying to find hope in Jesus, as Judas did, or accept that our frustrations are born of a desire for God. We are hungry and thirsting for the God we do not truly know, yet whom we are longing to meet. Christ was very straight with Peter's ignorance and desire. He needed to be cleansed, whether he understood it or not. He needed to accept the sign that he was cleansed, whether he was prepared to receive it gladly or not. Peter needed to meet Christ on his elusive terms, on the terms of Christ's cleansing. If we want to know God, we must learn the ways of God in echoes, footprints, and signs like the towel that Christ takes up and puts to our feet. It is a scandal that Christ should take hold of our feet when we have so much more engaging and attractive elements to our personalities with which to impress him. But he offers no more nor less than what we need to be part of him. So let's not step too quickly into making this cleansing a glorious idea to polish in our mind's eye. Christ, the leader and servant, a remarkable example of humility for us all to emulate on our better days. Let's try to stay instead with Peter's recoiling foot. You, Lord, are in the wrong place. You are confounding my expectations of you. You cannot be useful to me while you kneel before me as a slave would. This is the sign given to jolt us into negative space. We are indeed called to wash one another's feet, to follow Christ's example, but what that means in spirit and truth can only be discerned once we give up rehearsing our own virtue and begin instead to follow God into the desolate places where he has left his footprint and where his echo still resounds. The cross is where Christ is going, the place where God can never be tied down, even though his flesh is nailed there. How can we serve if we have not first learned to have our own feet grasped by Jesus, so that there's no escaping the demands of divine love? Later you will understand. For now, accept it. Accept that there's nothing that you quite understand or grasp. Accept now that you are understood and grasped by Christ, and that he's going ahead of us on the way to Golgotha. Why, no. I never thought other than that God is that great absence in our lives, the empty silence within, the place where we go seeking, not in hope to arrive or find. He keeps the interstices in our knowledge, the darkness between stars. His are the echoes we follow, the footprints he has just left. We put our hands in his side, hoping to find it warm. We look at people and places as though he had looked at them too, but miss the reflection.